Welcome to my PowerPoint about buffs that didn't matter. Starting with Death Knight, we have Deathbringer Sourfang. It went from 5 health to 6. I wish I was kidding. This is one of the few buffs that it did happen in Death Knight, just really didn't change anything about the card. Yeah, you would think that this card is like decent, right? Maybe if this card went to 4 mana, it would have been actually pretty good. Probably would have. But it's just really unfortunate because it's such an interesting card, right? Being able to spend health instead of mana for an infinitely replayable taunt genuinely does feel like something Death Knight should be doing. Like, Blood Death Knight should have been wanting to play this card. The issue is, it was a 5 mana 3/5 that you have to spend 5 health on every single time to replay it. Maybe if it were 4 mana, it would have been fine. You know, it's just, there are cards in Death Knight that synergize with a card like this, right? You had the, I think it's called, Screeching Banshee or whatever, that was released in Festival of Legends. It was the 5 mana, 3/6 life steal that whenever your hero's health changed, you summon a minion equal to that, right? So playing so if you were to have played, a 4 mana Sourfang, if that existed, and curved it into the Banshee, that would have been really good. Obviously, you know, that Banshee card was just, really fucking overpowered, but that's not really an issue with, Deathbringer Sourfang, right? It's just such an unfortunate time to see a card like Deathbringer Sourfang that, genuinely could have been a good card. Back in, 2022, early 2023, this was, a card that could have been good, like I'm saying, if it were 4 mana. But it never was, so we just have this sad shell of a card that only got +1 health. Then we have Demon Hunter. So Demon Hunter, I'm choosing Rhythm Dancer Risa. I talked about Risa in my mini set legendaries video and how awful the card is. It's just such a bad card. A 5 mana 3/5 with Rush is already bad, right? It would have to have a very strong effect to be a good card, right? And, you know, that does happen, you know? Typically, it would have happened. But its effect is, after your hero attacks, return this to your hand and set its cost to 1. That's not good. At all. Why would you want to do that when you could just play, a 5 mana minion with Rush that actually kills stuff and doesn't have 3 attack? So they buffed it to 4 mana, didn't change anything else about the card, and unsurprisingly, you still don't want to play it. It's too expensive to be just a good tempo minion that you can get a lot of value out of because it has the 5 and now 4 mana attacks. It doesn't have enough stats to make it, threatening to keep bouncing over and over again. And it's just such a weirdly designed card that, if this were, a 2 mana 2/2 or something, 2 mana 2/2, 2 mana 2/3, and that, with Rush and the same effect, it probably would have been actually a very strong card. Because, you know, a replayability on a card like this, it comes from the first portion of the effect. The same thing is for Sourfang, right? The card being too expensive up front is what really holds it back. Not, the effect. Yeah, the effect's not great, but it's partially just the upfront cost is just too much on these cards. Then for Druid, we have Malorn. So this video could have been, almost entirely Caverns of Time cards if I really wanted to, but I'm not going to. I'm only going to do, 1 or 2, and Malorn is a real big one. So Malorn, it was already really bad, right? 7 mana, 9/7 beast, do nothing. Death Rattle, shuffle this into your deck, so again, do nothing. And the buff is, genuinely significant. This is, a gigantic buff, actually speaking. It goes from... So now it has Death Rattle go dormant, revive after 2 friendly beasts die. That is, a very significant buff. You don't have to keep spending more mana on the Malorn. You don't have to redraw it. It's just, how do you ever drop a 7 mana 9/7 that does nothing on board? How do you drop that? You can't drop it in Wild, because, obviously, you couldn't drop it in Twist when Twist came out. It's just why? Why go out of your way to buff this legendary of all possible ones and then don't at least give it Rush? If it had Rush, it probably have some niche in Beast Druid, genuinely, but it's just, why? Right? It just doesn't make sense. This card just doesn't make any sense. It's just really unfortunate looking at the card, especially because you had something like Rat King, which was eventually printed, which came out before this by a lot. That was a 5 mana 5/5 with Rush, and then Dormant have 5 friendly minions die, which is a significantly harder condition for 2 less mana. And it has Rush. It's just crazy. This card just... Why? Why? Malorn is such a cool card. I don't know. He's cool looking, but we can't play him. So then we have Hunter. So I have to talk about 2 Hunter cards. I have to. It's just... You can't make a video about buffs that don't matter without talking about Perils in Paradise for Hunter. It's not possible. I'm so sorry. But... God damn, dude. Okay, so Ranger Gilly was 6 mana, and then they buffed it to 5 mana. They didn't buff any of the warrior cards, aside from Rycleaver, but Rycleaver also sucks. So, Ranger Gilly is one of the most disgusting pseudo buffs to ever happen. It might have mattered if the warrior cards were playable. It genuinely could have. It could have just made people be like, oh, okay, Gilly got buffed. Now it's kind of playable. If the warrior cards were good and got buffed. But they didn't. So, I don't know what more to say. It's just, I've beaten Gilly to death. I've beaten this horse to death a million times about how terrible Gilly is. I will never stop talking about how bad Gilly is. And then, guess what? When the next Hunter Legendary comes out, that's fucking unplayable. I'll beat that one to death. You know, I probably would have done it to Hemet if I cared enough to talk about Hemet. But Hemet is terrible. Hemet is so bad, there's no point to even talk about it. I'm going to be so honest with you. But, yeah. Then we have Furious Fowls. So Furious Fowls went from summoning 2 3/2s to summoning 2 3/3s. And you know what? That does sound like a pretty significant buff, right? You know, it's a 50% health increase on the birds overall, right? The issue is the birds have immune while attacking. So a health buff is significantly less valuable than any single other change they could have made to this card. Any single change. They could have made it so this card would summon a 3/2 bird that would attack, and then summon another 3/2 bird that would attack. So that he didn't summon at the same time. And that would be a bigger buff. Because it could get around certain things. It's just... Or like summon the birds. I don't even know. Dude, or you just could have made them 4 attack. Or you could have summoned a 3rd bird. Or you could have 5 mana. Or anything. The funny thing is this is a significantly larger buff for Shaman than it was for Hunter. Because Shaman can play Hagatha the Fabled, pull Furious Fowls, and then get a 6 mana 6/6 that summons 6/6 in stats and deals 6 damage. Or 6 mana 12/12 that deals 6 damage. Why can't Hunter do that? Why am I not allowed to do something like that in my Hunter class with my Hunter cards? For Mage, we have unexpected results. This is one of the first ever buffs to happen. I talked about this in my first ever buffs video. It's from the Boomsday buffs, and it went from 4 mana to 3 mana. Of course, it's summon 2 random 2-cost minions improved by spell damage. This card is actually just like genuinely very sad for me because I thought this card would see play. I actually thought it could be like kind of decent as a card, and it just really wasn't, and it really isn't. Lab Partner didn't get printed until Skullomance. You don't really... The best spell damage card in the game was the 4 mana 3/2 that would give you... Or, not 3/2, sorry. 4 mana 4/3 that would give you +2 spell damage. That was the best elemental in Mage. That was the best one in the game at the time. And it's just... Spell damage was just not really worthwhile. This is like the first card that mentions being improved by spell damage as well. So it's just like... It had so much potential, and it's just not there. Maybe if this card would come back to standard and they print like a 1-drop with like spell damage or something, you could combo them together, you get 2 3-drops for like 3 mana, and that's actually genuinely pretty good. But the stars didn't align, so unexpected results just never got the chance to succeed, even though on paper it's not a weak card. It genuinely isn't a weak card. If there was like a good 2-drop or like a good 1-drop that has spell damage, like this could have been a pretty good card. Then we have Paladin. So for Paladin, I'm choosing Grime Street Enforcer. Yes, I know this card technically is good in Standard. However, the buff, air quotes, to Grime Street Enforcer was a significant nerf to this card in Wild. Going from 1 to 2 attack is huge because of Crystology. Crystology is one of the best draw cards ever printed, and losing Grime Street Outfitter for consistency on Crystology killed the card. Absolutely killed it in Wild. It also has been a gigantic nerf to hand buff Paladin in Wild ever since. This is just like such a weird change that feels like such an oversight. Because Grime Street Outfitter was a genuinely powerful meta card in the game before this buff happened, when it went to the core set. So it's like, why did they do this? I know for a fact they know this card was seeing play. There's just no justification for it. It's such a weird thing that's been just like a giant middle finger to Wild players that we constantly get. And it's sad. It's really sad, because, I mean, I liked playing with Grime Street Enforcer. Outfitter. Sorry, not Enforcer. I liked playing the low-tempo early game into a stronger mid-game of Handbuff Paladin and Wild. It was really fun. Those decks were fun. But guess what? How the fuck do you do that now? I can't play this card in my format anymore. Simply because they had to give it 2-2 in stats. It could have been a 1-3. Why couldn't it have just been a 1-3? A 1-3 is also better to buff from hand buff effects. So it's like, what the fuck? It's a genuine what the fuck. Then we have Free from Amber. So this card went from 8 to 7 mana. Free from Amber actually was like relatively okay during its time in Standard. Wasn't great, don't get me wrong. It was a card that you could play, and it was genuinely a really strong card to generate, but it never really was like anything special, I will be honest with you. The issue is that was in 2017. The year is 2023 when this card got buffed. Now it's 2024. What was this buff ever supposed to do? I get that it was for like the Ungoro twist, I think. Probably wasn't. I'm gonna be honest with you. It probably just wasn't. I don't even know. But that was like the like most fucking pointless buff ever. Free from Amber just can't work in today's game. It's not like you're playing in Standard with very, very, very few 8 drops, so you can consistently hit the Lich King like you could back then. And hitting the Lich King was really fucking strong, because the Lich King was like one of the best legendaries ever at that point. And guess what? Now it's not. 8 drops are just not worth it. Like, at all. Like, at all. It's unbelievable, some of these changes. Because a lot of these changes are recent. They are, like, within the last year or two. And that's why I want to talk about them. Because it's like, what's the point of them? A lot of cards just have to rot and be bad. Why couldn't we have changed, like, actual cards that had potential? Like, cards that are only, like, 1 or 2 mana too expensive. Not 4 mana too expensive. It's crazy, man. It's just crazy. Then we have Pogo Hopper for Rogue. So Pogo Hopper is a little bit of a sad case, because I think this card, if it were put in the core set right now, at the time I'm saying this, you know, in the year 2024, if it were in the current core set, I forget what it's called. It's like, I think we're in Year of the Pegasus. Whatever. If it was in the core set right now, it would actually be a genuinely playable card. I would say that. If Pogo Hopper were in Standard at the time of this being recorded, it would actually be a playable card, and Pogo Rogue would be a real deck. You have Sonya Water Dancer, which does work with Pogo Hoppers very efficiently. You have Breakdance, which works with both very efficiently. And it actually would have been really good. If Pogo Hopper were in Standard, Pogo Hopper Rogue would genuinely be a good deck. I'm being serious right now. The issue is that it wasn't. It was printed in Boomsday. And in Boomsday, it wasn't very good. You could play it. Don't get me wrong. You could play Pogo Hopper Rogue during Boomsday, and it was very fun. It was a genuinely fun deck. But to call it a good deck is disingenuous to the power level of the card. And, you know, the card doesn't deserve to be lied about. Pogo Hopper is a really fun card that does a lot of really fun things. But calling it a good card, that's a bit much. I really do wish this card was in the core set right now. Could you imagine playing Rogue in Standard right now with Pogo Hopper? It would actually be so much fun. So much fun. Then we have Shaman. I have to talk about March of the Lich King Shaman until I get through all the cards. I have to. March of the Lich King Shaman is one of the saddest wasted potential of a expansion ever. You could genuinely 1-1 port every single card in March of the Lich King Shaman to Death Knight, and they would go from unplayable to genuinely powerful cards. Genuinely good cards. Like, look at Harkener of Dread right here. It used to be a 5-mana 2-2, taunt Death Rattle, summon a 6-6 with taunt. They just printed the Travel Security, I think it's called, which is a 6-mana 2-2 taunt that gives you that summons a random 8-drop. So imagine Harkener of Dread in 2013 in Death Knight. That's even before we talk about the buff version, which again is a very powerful card. 5 mana 2/2 Taunt Reborn. Death Rattle, summon a 4/4 undead with Taunt. Yes, it technically summons less stats from its Death Rattle, but now it has 2 of them, and it resummons a 2/1. Just for -2/-2 on that initial Taunt minion. This card genuinely would be incredible in Death Knight, but it's a Shaman card. And all of the Marshal the Lich King Shaman cards are Shaman cards and not Death Knight cards. And all of them would be good in Death Knight, which is crazy. It's like, it feels like half of that expansion was specifically made to not work in the classes they're in. Druid can't make almost any use of the undead cards that they got. Shaman can't make any use of these Death Rattle cards they got, or like the big cards. It's just such a sad sight to see wasted potential in this video game, which is part of why I'm making this video. I'm sick and tired of cards just being wasted potential. It's really, really, really sad. Speaking of obscene wasted potential, we have Krul the Unshackled. So, let me paint you a picture. It's Caverns of Time. You see that Krul the Unshackled, a horrifically terrible legendary, is getting buffed. How would you think this card gets buffed? Would you think, oh, it stops being a 9 mana minion and probably goes to like 7, maybe 8 mana, but most likely 7 mana, and it probably would have been pretty decent at that point? Yeah, that's what any reasonable person ever would have thought. You know what Blizzard decided to do? Make it a 9 mana 9/9. You cannot play this card. Ever. The issue with Krul the Unshackled is not only is it incredibly expensive and really, really weak because you don't actually have many big demons in your hand by the time you would get to 9 mana. It's also a battle cry effect that has a condition, but a battle cry effect in Big Demon Warlock. What card has been the best way to cheat out demons in Warlock since, let's see, 2014? If you answered Void Caller, you would be correct. 4 mana 3/4, Death Rattle, summon a random demon from your hand. Well, wait a minute, you might be saying. Krul the Unshackled has a battle cry, so it's bad to summon from your hand. Yes, exactly. It is bad. So you couldn't play this card in Twist because you wanted to play Void Caller. You can't play it in Wild because, well, okay, I mean, Big Warlock is terrible and has been bad, and they haven't really given it any support, like, ever, and the only support they have given it was really bad, so, I mean, you know, that's partially why. But you still want to be playing Void Caller in Wild, or you wanted to be playing Skull of the Minari, and you can't do that. You can't do that. Krul is the definition of waste of pixels, waste of time, waste of money, waste of everything, because this is, like, one of the most pointless buffs to ever exist. At least Malorn got like a gigantic buff and was still bad. Krul got +2 attack. Roll Tide, brother. Roll Tide. And then we have Warrior. So Detonation Juggernaut went from a 5 mana 3/6 to a 4 mana 3/4. It has Taunt, and then Battlecry, give Taunt minions in your hand +2/+2. It went from being the Taunt version of Glowstone Technician to being a slightly cheaper version of Taunt Glowstone Technician. This card's really sad, I'm going to be honest with you, because Taunt Warrior is genuinely very cool. It just never has really been that good. They were also, like, afraid to make Taunt Warrior good because, well, in Showdown the Badlands, D Minor Brand came out. And you can't really make other Warrior decks good until you nerf the shit out of the one broken Warrior deck. Which leaves us in the scenario that we're in, where, well, I can't play Taunt Warrior because it's too weak. It's sad. It's also really unbelievably crazy that Detonation Juggernaut is better than Gilly, like, by a lot. Even the OG version, because at least Detonation Juggernaut has Taunt, and Battlecry is better than Death Rattle. Doesn't matter if it's -1 health compared to Gilly, Battlecry is better than Death Rattle. Just objectively. Yeah, oh, it's only on Taunt minions, oh, blah, blah, okay, just only run Taunt minions, you know? Gilly is just... Gilly, man. Gilly. Why? I can't, man. I don't know. Detonation Juggernaut is really sad. I like playing Taunt Warrior. I really wish that it would get more buffs because, like, these cards are fun. I like playing big hand buff cards that, you know, have conditions. They're fun to play with, and I can't do that. Then, lastly, we have Mukla's Champion. +1 attack to Mukla's Champion ends it, Blizzard. Oh my lord. That's gonna be it for me, guys. If you enjoyed, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Tell me what you think down below. Are there other cards that could have fit into this video? Cards that got buffed and it didn't make any difference? Are there cards that were nerfed and it didn't make any difference? What cards do you... I can't do this anymore, man. Oh my god, they're so bad. I can't, like, I'm trying to make a funny about, like, terrible cards in Hearthstone, but god, they're all so bad. That's gonna be it for me. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.
Shadows are rising again!
Darker than they've ever been. As evil descends from the skies, the world cries out, how will we survive? Out of the hall of explorers, and up from the dusty tomb. They grab their whips and fedoras. These legends of the past know exactly what